Okay, so this is what their tree should look like once they get all of the animal species on the tree and the traits, and they should do that on their whiteboard so they can share with the rest of the class. But you're going to have them do that, and you're going to have them answer questions 6 through 11 before you talk about it. And you're going to be walking around and helping them think through this. So here's some of the things you might think about. So number 6 says, a race implies a winner. If this map is chronological, right, meaning this is time, with the starting point being ancient time and the ending point being modern day, so this is ancient and this is modern, this is time. So the question is asking, is there a winner, right? And they should recognize that all of these animals made it to modern day. They didn't go extinct. And they all made it. Time marches at the same speed, whether you're picking up more stamps on your card or not, it's all marching at the same speed. So there's no winner. They all get to the end at the same time, okay? And so they should go back and look at the runner and think, oh yeah, okay, we don't know how long they wandered, but they all wandered at the same amount of time from here to here. Okay, so they all got to the end at the same time. Number 7 says, does the distance of the path or the amount of checkpoints through which a species passes relate to how evolved that species is? Now, this is a common misconception among students. So they might choose on this tree, and that might be a question you ask them as you're walking around. Say, hey, so who's the most evolved on this tree? And a lot of students like to say the pigeon is, because it went through the most checkpoints. Okay? And by that same logic, you could ask them, all right, so the cow has one more checkpoint than the human. Does that mean the cow's more evolved than the human? And for that matter, the pigeon has way more checkpoints than the human. Does that mean a pigeon is more evolved than a human? Right? And as they think about that, well, obviously not, but likewise, is a human more evolved than the rest of them? The answer is no. Nobody's more evolved than somebody else. We've all been evolving the same amount of time. The number of checkpoints, what is that? How did we decide these checkpoints? And another question I like to ask students is, do you think that there might be 1,000 more checkpoints along this line that we just haven't chosen to map? Sure, we've just chosen to map these. So it doesn't mean that you can count up the traits. The traits are things we just map, right? So there's a couple of things actually too that you want to label on this tree. I'm going to grab another marker. There's a couple of terms you might go ahead and label on someone's tree, and that is that this, we've talked about this before, this is a node. And what does the node represent? What is that? Well, that node is a common ancestor. And in this case, this node is the common ancestor of who? It's the common ancestor of the cow and the human, right? So the node represents a common ancestor. Now, these are traits. And it's just arbitrary what we chose to map on the tree. Now, obviously, for this activity, we chose the perfect traits that are the defining features of each of these clades on here. So that's another word you might want to introduce, and that is that we call this right here, that is together, right? Everyone included in there, this is a clade. Okay, and some of the other things will be introduced in lecture. But, okay, so that's number 7. So number 8 says, what do the checkpoints represent? Where should the checkpoints be located? So the checkpoints, what are they? The checkpoints are traits, right? The checkpoints are traits. And where are they located? A lot of students love to put them at the node. Now, putting them at the node indicates that that particular trait is what caused the speciation event, or that's where the speciation event occurred. Now, is it possible? Yeah, it's possible, I suppose, that that trait was a defining trait, but it's not likely. So really, those traits should be mapped somewhere in between the last speciation event and the next speciation event, the next node. All right. So that's what the traits are and where they should be located. Number 9 says, referring to your answer from number 5 above, what does it mean when two species share several similar stamps? So number 5 asked, which runners stayed together the longest? So if they share similar traits, what does that mean? Well, it means that they are more closely related. It means that if they run along the same line, they've gotten the same traits, then they share a more recent common ancestor. than others on the tree. So that's the correct way to say it, that they share a more recent common ancestor than other people on the tree. Okay. Number 10 says, why are humans and cows so similar compared to the rest of the species? So human cows, why are they so similar? Well, they share a recent common ancestor. They've run the same path, picking up the same traits along the way. And then number 11 says, what are the limitations of the race model? There's a lot of limitations to this race model. So for example, it's not really a race. We're all running at the exact same speed. Okay? The biggest limitation to this race model is that there weren't actually a whole bunch of different runners at the beginning. These guys were not a bunch of different runners starting out. They were one runner, one common ancestor that broke into more. So it's more like gremlins. This might date me, but you pour water on the gremlins and poof, they make more individuals. That's kind of more what it's like than it is like separate runners running the race. The other thing is the checkpoints, right? The path doesn't always diverge into two when we get a checkpoint. And the checkpoints aren't actually right at the divergence point. They're somewhere before the divergence point. So there's a lot of things you can point out about the race model that aren't exactly accurate, but it's a model. That's exactly what it is. It's a model to illustrate to students what a phylogenetic tree, how we build them, what they look like. So this is a phylogenetic tree, right? Okay, and what does a phylogenetic tree represent? This is a good question for students to ask as a whole class. What is a phylogenetic tree? Well, it's a representation of history. It's a representation of what we think happened in the evolution of these species. It's a hypothesis about the relationships between these organisms based on characteristics that they share. Okay? All right, so after you've had that discussion, you're going to have them do part 3. And I will go ahead and stop this for a minute and we'll explain part 3.